Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I'm a waiter at this fancy restaurant downtown, and let me tell you, it's been a hell of a week. Entitled customers left and right, demanding ridiculous things, and my manager breathing down my neck about upselling. By Friday, I was ready to blow off some steam. I decided to hit up this small town bar I'd heard about. It's not my usual scene, but I needed a change of pace. Plus, I'd just gotten paid and treated myself to a new weed vape. Time to relax, right? I walk into this bar and it's pretty chill. The staff are wearing their own clothes, which is a nice change from the stuffy uniforms I'm used to. I grab a seat at the bar and order my first shot. The bartender's cool, we chat a bit, and I start to unwind. Now, there's this group of four older folks, probably in their 50s, sitting at a table near the smoking patio door. I notice them looking at me every time I walk past to go outside for a vape. At first, I think maybe they recognize me from somewhere, but no, they're just being nosy. So I'm going back and forth, taking shots, stepping out for a vape, coming back in. I'm starting to feel pretty good, you know, buzzed and relaxed. Exactly what I needed after the week I'd had. I'm on my way back in from my third vape break when suddenly this lady from the table grabs my arm. I'm thinking, what the hell? The woman starts berating me for repeatedly walking past them without offering any service. She is clearly upset and demanding to know why I've been ignoring them. I explain that I don't work at the bar and point out that I've been openly drinking at the bar for the past 20 minutes. Before I can fully process the ridiculousness of the situation, the woman's husband jumps in. He asks if I can at least fetch someone who can help them, despite me clearly stating I'm not an employee. At this point, I'm pretty buzzed and high from the vape. After a week of dealing with entitled customers, I'm in no mood to play along. I chuckle and tell them I won't be doing that, suggesting they try getting the attention of the actual staff instead. They got all huffy and started gathering their things. They'd been sitting there this whole time, not even trying to get the attention of any real staff members, just expecting everyone around them to cater to their needs. I overheard the woman complaining about young people and poor service. I just shake my head and head back to the bar. The bartender notices the commotion and asks what happened. I briefly explain the situation, telling him about the group mistaking me for staff and getting upset when I wouldn't serve them. The bartender finds it hilarious and comments on how some people can be so entitled. We both have a good laugh about it. I end up staying for a few more hours, getting properly drunk and having a great time. The bartender and I swap stories about ridiculous customers, and by the end of the night, we're like old friends. When it's time to settle up, I leave the bartender a massive tip. Partly because the service was great, but also as a kind of thanks for dealing with jerks like that group gesture. When I was about to leave, guess who walked back in? Yep, the entitled group. Apparently, they couldn't find anywhere else that would put up with their attitude. The woman recognizes me and starts complaining. She sarcastically hopes I'm happy with myself, informing me that they had to drive around for an hour looking for another place to eat. I respond by suggesting that next time they should try asking for help instead of demanding it from random strangers. With that parting shot, I wish them a good night. All in all, I'd call that a win. I guess I should start from the beginning. I own a small ranch just outside of town where I keep a few pony horses. It's not much, but it's been in my family for generations, and I've worked hard to keep it running. I use the ponies for therapy sessions with kids who have special needs. It's rewarding work, and I love seeing the smiles on those kids' faces when they interact with the gentle animals. One day, this woman shows up at my ranch unannounced. She's got this air about her like she owns the place, and she's dragging a kid behind her who looks about 7 or 8. The woman greeted me cheerfully, announcing that they were there to see the ponies. I apologized and explained that we were closed that day, only offering therapy sessions by appointment. Undeterred, she brushed off my explanation, saying they didn't need a therapy session and that her little angel just wanted to ride one of the ponies. I tried to explain that the ponies weren't for casual rides, but she wasn't having it. She insisted that I could make an exception, mentioning that her daughter had been begging for a pony ride all week. I calmly reiterated that these ponies were specially trained for therapy work and not for entertainment. She started getting huffy, her face turning red. The woman then tried to intimidate me by asking if I knew who she was, claiming her husband was a very important man in town and threatening that she could shut down my operation with just one word. I asked her to leave and stated that the ponies were not for sale or rent. Frustrated, she declared that they would find somewhere else that appreciated their business before storming off, dragging her kid behind her. A couple of days later, I'm out in the barn when I hear a commotion. I step outside and see two guys trying to lead one of my ponies out of the corral. They're not being gentle about it either. I shouted at them, demanding to know what they thought they were doing. The guys looked up startled. They're young, probably in their early 20s, and they look like they've never been on a ranch before. One of them nervously stammered that they were just borrowing the pony. The other chimed in, claiming their cousin said they could have it. It doesn't take a genius to figure out who their cousin is. I reach for my phone to call the police, but one of the guys sees what I'm doing and panics. He pleaded with me not to call, insisting they didn't want any trouble. I pointed out that stealing my pony was indeed trouble. They start to back away, leaving the pony behind. But I'm not about to let them just walk away. I warned them to stop, informing them that the police were on their way. That's when things get crazy. One of the guys makes a run for it, heading towards their beat-up truck, parked near the road. The other one hesitates, looking between his friend and me. Now I should mention that I keep a shotgun in the barn for protection against coyotes and other wild animals. I run inside and grab it, loading it with some rock salt rounds. I'm not looking to kill anyone, just scare them off. When I come back out, the second guy is halfway to the truck. I fire a warning shot into the air, shouting that the next one wouldn't be a warning. They both freeze in their tracks, hands in the air. It's almost comical how fast they change their tune. The second guy started begging me not to shoot, apologizing profusely. The first one quickly blamed their cousin Karen, claiming she said I wouldn't mind them taking the pony. I keep them there at gunpoint until the police arrive. When the officers show up, the two guys start spilling their guts. Turns out Karen had promised them a cut if they managed to steal one of my ponies for her kid. The police take their statements and arrest them for attempted theft. I press charges, of course, but I'm not done yet. I ask the officers if they'd be willing to pay Karen a visit too. One of the officers grins at me, agreeing with pleasure and mentioning they've had run-ins with her before. Later that day, I get a call from the police station. They brought Karen in for questioning and she'd thrown an absolute fit. Apparently, she'd been screaming about how she was going to sue everyone from me to the police department. Her husband, the very important man she'd been bragging about, turned out he's just a middle manager at a local bank, and he was mortified when he found out what she'd done. He came down to the station, apologized profusely, and offered to pay for any damages. Karen got charged with conspiracy to commit theft. Her cousins got probation since they cooperated. I've spent years working with kids, teaching them about responsibility and respect. Never thought I'd have to teach those same lessons to a grown woman and her family. I started at this lab with my biochemistry degree. Most of the senior scientists were supportive and willing to teach us lab techs. They'd encourage us to ask questions and treated us like valuable team members. But then there's this one licensed scientist. Let's just call him Arrogant Jerk, because that's exactly what he is. From day one, he's been a thorn in everyone's side. He struts around the lab like he owns the place, constantly reminding us that he's a senior scientist with a license. According to him, we lab techs shouldn't even breathe without his supervision. The guy's so full of himself, it's a wonder he can fit through the lab doors. He's always going on about how we should only run tests when he's physically watching us. Meanwhile, all the other senior scientists tell us to just call if we need help. They trust us to do our jobs. Not Arrogant Jerk, though. He treats us like we're incompetent children. It's gotten to the point where everyone in the lab tries to avoid working with him. We'd rather juggle flaming test tubes than deal with his attitude. The only reason he hasn't been fired is because our manager and the lab safety supervisor seem to have a soft spot for him. God knows why. So there I was, scheduled to work with arrogant jerk and another scientist we'll call good guy. We had 2 tests to run that day. Arrogant jerk had started setting up one of the machines when I began checking the pipetting tips. You see, recently someone had accidentally loaded tips of different sizes, which could have caused a major problem if good guy hadn't caught it in time. I was just being cautious, but arrogant jerk didn't see it that way. He practically jumped down my throat. He rudely questioned what I was doing, reminding me that I was working under his license. He arrogantly said if I were setting up the machine, he would be the one double-checking my work. Since he was the one setting it up, he insisted he didn't need me double-checking his work. I was fuming. I'd noticed that one of the 50 UL tip racks he'd loaded had a few 300 UL tips mixed in. But after his little outburst, I decided to keep my mouth shut. I put the tips back and walked away, giving him the biggest eye roll I could muster. Instead, I went to help good guy who'd just returned from a meeting and was happy to have my assistance. About 10 minutes later, we heard a loud crunch, followed by arrogant jerk cursing. He let out a panicked exclamation, realizing he'd made a big mistake. Just as I'd predicted, when the machine tried to pick up the mixed tip rack, it pushed down too far. The tip snapped into pieces, causing reagents to splash all over the machine's deck. Almost 100 samples were contaminated, and 2 hours of work went down the drain. You should have seen arrogant jerk's face. He went from his usual smug expression to pure panic in seconds. 2 supervisors came rushing in, and let me tell you, they were not happy. The first supervisor demanded to know what had happened, declaring it completely unacceptable. The second supervisor angrily questioned if arrogant jerk understood how much this mistake was going to cost them. Arrogant jerk tried to stammer out some excuses, but they weren't having it. He got written up on the spot, and I heard later that he was put on probation. The lab safety supervisor, who'd always had his back, was the one who pushed for the harshest punishment. Since that day, arrogant jerk has been a lot quieter around the lab. He doesn't strut around anymore, and he certainly doesn't brag about his license. The other lab techs and I still refuse to work with him unless absolutely necessary, but now he doesn't put up a fight about it. I got a bit of recognition for helping good guy complete his test successfully that day. The supervisors even commended my attention to detail. I didn't mention that I'd noticed the mixed tips earlier. No need to rub salt in the wound. But I did suggest implementing a new double-check system for all machine setups, regardless of who does the initial setup. The idea was approved, and now we have fewer mistakes across the board. It's been a few months since the incident, and things in the lab are running smoother than ever. Arrogant jerk keeps to himself mostly, and when he does interact with us lab techs, he's a lot more respectful. I guess sometimes it takes a spectacular failure to knock someone off their high horse. In this case, it took a bunch of broken pipette tips and contaminated samples to teach a so-called senior scientist a lesson in humility. My brother was always the golden child. He was charismatic, popular, and could charm his way out of anything. Our parents doted on him, excusing his every mistake and bailing him out of every trouble. Me? I was the quiet one, the responsible one. I worked hard, got good grades, and tried to make my parents proud. As we grew older, the differences between us became more apparent. I moved out after college, got a job, and started my own family. My brother, on the other hand, never left the nest. He bounced from job to job, never holding one for more than a few months. He'd get drunk, cause scenes, and somehow always end up back at our parents' place. I tried to talk to our parents about it, but they wouldn't hear it. I suggested that it might be time for my brother to stand on his own feet. Mom brushed it off, saying he was just going through a tough time and would figure it out. Dad chimed in, calling my brother a free spirit who would settle down when he was ready. Well, he never did. Instead, he got worse. He had a kid but couldn't even pay child support. Our parents covered that too. They bought him cars, paid his rent when he occasionally moved out, and always welcomed him back when things inevitably fell apart. Things took a turn for the worse when our mom passed away. My brother's drinking spiraled out of control, and he became increasingly abusive towards our dad. I tried to intervene, but Dad was in denial. When I pointed out that my brother's behavior wasn't just grief, but abuse, Dad insisted he could handle it, refusing my help. It wasn't until my brother got arrested that I finally had a chance to step in. Those last 5 months with Dad were bittersweet. He finally saw the truth about my brother, and it broke his heart. Dad admitted he'd been foolish and had enabled my brother all these years. I reassured him it wasn't his fault, that he was just trying to help. Before he passed, Dad made me promise not to let my brother take advantage anymore. I promised, and Dad changed his will. He left the land to my nephew, my brother's 10-year-old son, and split everything else between my brother and me. Or so I thought. When Dad passed, I discovered he'd left everything except the land to me. All the possessions, the accounts, everything. My brother found out about Dad's death barely 20 minutes after it happened, and he came storming in. He demanded that I get out, claiming the place was now his. When I told him Dad had left it to me, he accused me of lying and threatened to change the funeral arrangements and get the death certificate. I had to leave the trailer, but I made sure to take everything with me. Our cousins, my kids, and my husband all pitched in. In 4 days, we cleared out everything. I mean everything. Not even a fork was left behind. When my brother discovered everything was gone, he was furious. He asked where all the stuff was, and I told him it was gone because Dad didn't want him to have anything. He threatened to call the lawyer, but I calmly told him to go ahead, knowing it was all legal. I shut off all the utilities and left him there. His car's about to be repossessed, and he'll lose a trailer if he can't get a mortgage. And with his part-time pizza job, that's not likely. Now I've got 2 storage units full of stuff I don't need, but that's not the real inheritance. The real inheritance is watching my 53-year-old brother finally get his comeuppance. Just yesterday I saw him walking down the street, looking lost. He asked if he could crash at my place for a while. I refused, telling him he was on his own now. He protested, saying I couldn't just leave him with nothing because he was my brother. I responded that I wasn't leaving him with nothing, but giving him the chance to finally grow up. At least I know I've done right by Dad and protected what's left of our family's legacy. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.